Hello and welcome to another episode of the Formula Next Gen podcast, where today we're going to be taking a look at the last weekend of junior single-seater racing. Coming up in this episode, we're going to be reviewing the Euro Formula Open, Formula Regional European Championship, Italian F4, as well as Formula 2, Formula 3 and the Indy Next Championship. So we're going to begin with Euro Formula Open, which continued in La Castellet at the circuit Paul Ricard. They're now exactly halfway through their season with 4 rounds down and 4 to go. It's quite an interesting championship to watch, to be honest. There aren't that many cars competing, not that many drivers, just 8 cars on track all weekend. So it's still action-packed though, despite the fact there's, it looked quite a sparse grid. And it's not completely one-sided though. Every team has won a race, at least one race so far, although the Motor Park team will probably go on to win the team's championship. The championship standings after the weekend though, so it's Mexico's Noel Leon who's the championship leader, and Bryce Aron behind. Kian Shield, Francesco Simonazzi close to each other. Juju Noda, Jocke Bergmeister are the 2 rookies in the championship, with Juju Noda in the lead of the rookie championship so far. Noel Leon topped the only qualifying session on the Friday in front of Francesco Simonazzi. And behind him, making his Euro Formula Open debut this weekend, was Vladislav Rybov. The race got off to a bad start for Bryce Aron, though, who stalled on the grid, and there was contact between Noel Leon and Francesco Simonazzi, and both were out of the race. Juju Noda, the rookie championship leader, daughter of Hideki Noda, of course, racing for Noda Racing, took the lead and held off Bergmeister and Aron in the safety car restart, and took her first win of the season and the first female winner of the Euro Formula Open. Very emotional after the race, as you can imagine. Took advantage of the situation in front to deliver when it counted. She's now 5th in the championship and the leading rookie, although there are only 2 full-time rookies by the looks of it, her and Bergmeister. It's also worth mentioning a good recovery drive from Bryce Aron to 3rd after the stall on the grid. And he needed that after Leon's retirement to close up to him on the championship standings. In race 2, Bryce Aron reduced his gap to leader Noel Leon even more by taking the win of this reverse grid race, with Leon only managing 7th after losing his tyres in the final laps in the very hot weather that weekend. Kian Shields came home in 2nd place, and behind him was Simonazzi and Noda. Race 3 was Kian Shields, who started in P1 and he converted to his 2nd race victory of the season so far. Behind him, Juju Noda and Noel Leon battled out for the remaining podium places, and Leon finished in P2 with Noda in P3. Not the best weekend for Leon overall, with very good scoring from his championship rivals, but a strong P2 finish in the 3rd race means he's still leading the championship going into the 2nd half of the season. Juju Noda had her best weekend by far, with of course the win and 3rd place in the 3rd race. Francesco Simonazzi was of course caught up in that crash with Leon in race 1 and retired, finished 3rd in the race 2 and is 4th in the standings overall, 10 points behind Bergmeister. News since broken that Simonazzi will be making his Formula 3 debut at Spa, competing for Rodin Carlin for the last 2 rounds at Spa and Monza. This, of course, will have to come at the expense of Max Esterson, who himself replaced fellow American Hunter Yeany at Carlin this year. Josh Mason, who competed for 2 rounds at Spa and the Hungarian in Euro Formula Open, but was absent this weekend in Paul Ricard, will be making the big step up to Formula 2 with Chevrolet Racing in place of Brad Benavides. This is a big step up for any driver from a regional Formula 3 level straight to Formula 2. And with this level of competition, albeit at a circuit he has already raced at this year, Spa, it will be interesting to see how he stacks up with his Chevrolet teammate Roy Nissany and compare his results to Benavides' recent results. He hasn't had the most impressive junior career so far, but by the looks of it, he has competed in Euro Formula for a few years. But he is a race winner in that championship, and we'll just have to wait and see. It's looking it's going to be pretty tricky conditions this weekend, so best of luck to him in Belgium. The Formula Regional European Championship, also at Paul Ricard, it was a rookie from France, Alessandro Giusti, who took pole from Martini Stenson, and behind them was Andrea Kimi Antonelli. Giusti was happy with the performance after the race, saying, "Yesterday I was upside down, and today we are on pole." This is in reference to his collision with Giovanni Mascio, which caused a red flag in the collective test, as Gypsy's car was sent barrel rolling, so a good recovery from him to take pole on the Friday. He then followed it up with his maiden win of the championship with fellow Frenchman Sami Megatunov in P2. Rookie and championship contender Stenshorn took the final step on the podium of race 1 in 3rd place in front of Tim Tramnitz and Andrea Kimi Antonelli. A collision between Enzo Scionte and Niels Coulan brought out a safety car. After the race, Giusti identified his strong pace after the restart to build a gap from Megatunov behind, who he said was faster in the first portion of the race to eventually take the win. Megatunov was happy to take a podium for MP Motorsport after the tragic events at Spa a few weeks ago, and was happy to be able to deliver for the team, bringing them and himself the second podium of the season so far. Martinez Stenshorn lost the place to Megatunov at the start, but was happy with P3 to bring home good points. The weekend is structured with 2 separate days essentially, being, in my opinion, easier to follow than some of the junior series. No reverse grid, just qualifying leading directly into the race on the Saturday, and the same thing on the Sunday. And it was Antonelli who took pole for race 2 behind Esteban Masson, Tim Tramnitz and Martinez Stenshorn on the grid. After the qualifying, Antonelli was happy with the recovery from Saturday, where he struggled for pace. Masson, another Frenchman to do pretty well this weekend, was proud of his achievements too, and he followed this up with a P2 in the race, and so very happy for him. First podium for him and first for the team as well, so not a bad day for French Esteban Masson. Antonelli led from start to flag and is now the championship leader, moving from 2 points behind Stenshorn to 6 points in front. Stenshorn finished just off the podium in 4th place, with Giusti securing his best weekend of the season so far in 5th. The season will continue after the summer break in September at the Red Bull Ring. The Italian F4 Championship, also at Paul Ricard, featured 37 cars this weekend, which is in a very closely fought championship. And it was Kasper Stuka who led Friday free practice and took the win on race 1 from Ugo Chukwu's pole, making the pass at turn 1. The two then pulled away from the field, securing a big gap between them and 3rd place behind James Wharton. Ferrari Jr. took a tarpon and took 4th place, and behind him was PHM Racing's James Agosi. Qualifying for race 2 was close between Stuka and Wharton, who were separated by just 0.06 of a second. Behind them were Ugo Chukwu and Tarpanen. Stuka took the win from pole position, and in race 3 it was James Wharton who had certain victory taken away with about 20 seconds to go. Was overtaken by Stuka, who took the hat-trick this weekend, a hat-trick of race wins. Wharton said after the race the issue was to do with fuel injection, but wasn't too disheartened. He recognised his pace showed through during the race, and of course it was just bad luck that caused him to lose that in the dying moments, and was lucky not to lose more positions. A mechanical related issue like that near the end, he was lucky to hold on to 2nd place, so nowhere near as disastrous as it could have been. And those 75 points gained for Kasper Stuka, win in all 3 races, put him right back in the championship fight, up to 3rd now in the standings, with just 3 points separating him and Ugo Chukwu in 2nd. Arvid Lidblad, the overall championship leader so far, went comparatively missing in action this weekend, finishing 8th, 4th and 6th in these 3 races. He said after the race in his post-race interview that he put it down to the train of cars making it difficult to overtake, being stuck in a sort of a train of cars going down the long circuit and the long straight. He's still in the lead overall, and in the Rookies Championship, of course, by nearly 60 points with just 2 rounds to go. And took a Tarpanen's consistently this weekend, finishing 4th, 2nd and 3rd respectively, put him up to P5 in the standings. 2 months to go until the next race in Mugello at the end of September, and after that just 1 more in Vallelunga. In the Formula 3 at the Hungaroring, of course, on the Hungarian Grand Prix weekend, qualifying on the Friday, it was Zach O'Sullivan who put his Prema on pole for the feature. Prema got 2 cars in the front row, with Beganovic taking P2 on the grid. The drying track was tricky for the drivers to manage. Ollie Gray hit the barriers hard, red flag in the session. Thankfully okay, though he was out of qualifying, and the session resumed with many drivers briefly holding the pole spot, including Goethe, Boyer, Fornaroli, Bortoleto, but it was O'Sullivan who took the top spot on the Friday. Nikola Solov, who sits quite far down at the standings, was very happy with his P7 in qualifying, saying after that he puts this performance down to behind-the-scenes improvement, including more simulator work with the team. In the sprint race, Bedrin took advantage of his P2 start to take the lead from Mini on the reverse grid race. He couldn't hold that place for long though, and was eventually passed by Mini a few laps into the race. Neither Zach O'Sullivan or Pepe Marti had good sprint races, with both championship contenders now separated by only 1 point, getting caught up in separate incidents, both with Solov, and both finished way outside the points. And a strong second place finish for championship leader Gabriel Bortoleto boosts him up the championship lead. Solov was given a penalty for his collision with Marti, and due to his DNF, he will receive a three-place grid drop next week in Spa. The sprint race was won by Gabriele Mini, who was very pleased with his performance, particularly with his tyre management on a track which is always harsh on tyres. There were a few post-race penalties dished out after the race, as always in F2 and F3 it seems. Van Amersfoort drivers, all three of them were penalised for what seems to be a team mistake to do with tyres and not returning to them to parc fermé within a certain time frame. It's always upsetting to see these drivers punished for a thing that wasn't directly their fault. They're paying a lot of money to these race teams, a lot of them very experienced in the junior formulae, but one which obviously still makes mistakes, as everyone does, but we've seen it before with these sort of clerical errors by junior teams which can hamper their drivers. It's never nice to see. In the feature race, Zach O'Sullivan got away well from pole and took the checker flag first by over 2 seconds. His 4th win of the season, the most of any driver so far, and his 2nd feature race win. He said after the race it was a race of time management and the tyres began to fall off towards the end of the race. Dino Beganovic came home in P2, the rookie taking the Prema to a 1-2 finish and is currently 5th in the championship standings. Next week we're going to go to Spa with the leader Bortoleto being able to potentially seal the championship with 1 round early, so all eyes on him for the round in Belgium next week. In the Formula 2, it was Jack Doohan, the Alpine junior driver, who took pole on the Friday. He seems to like this track, having secured the win of the sprint last year. It's his first pole for a while. Alongside him on the front row is Victor Martins, rookie this year in F2, F3 champion, and of course fellow Alpine junior driver. Kush Miney finished qualifying in P10 and was beaten to turn 1 of the reverse grid sprint race by Dennis Hauger, and he took his 2nd sprint race win of the season. Novalak and Boschon collided on lap 12, bringing out the virtual safety car, and it was good battling towards the end of the race as the time management phase of the race was over and they could push to their heart's content to the end. Miney dropped back as Iwasa, Behrman and Pourchaire all made their way through the field, eventually finishing behind in that order behind Hauger, who is in first. Jack Doohan on pole with the feature got away well with Frederick Vesti, who jumped from 3rd to 2nd, passing Victor Martins. Zane Maloney didn't have a particularly good weekend, electing to start the feature on softs, pitting early, and that put him back out into traffic and walked away from the weekend with no points to show for his efforts. It looked like a strategy swap from the Dams team, as Ayumi Iwasa made good pace in the second half of the race on his soft tyres, passing fellow Red Bull junior Isaac Hadjar along the way. Jack Doohan was very happy with his performance as well he should be, getting the Grand Chelem, that's pole, leading every lap, race win and the fastest lap in the feature. He's most likely out of the championship fight this season, unfortunately, and can hopefully enjoy the remaining races of the season. Fred Vesti finished in P2 with Victor Martins in P3. Vesti extending his lead at the top of the championship slightly from Pourchaire. He's now 11 points ahead at the top. Pourchaire and Iwasa are separated by 10 points in the front, a considerable way in front of Victor Martins in P4. 4 more rounds of the championship to go, and the action will continue next week at Spa-Francorchamps. The ND Championship returned to the ovals at the Iris Speedway, very short oval, 9/10 of a mile or so. Jacob Abel took pole with a 2-lap average of 162 miles per hour. He was very happy with the results, having had a bad form in qualifying during most of the season. Race was delayed on the Saturday, which also impacted qualifying for the first race, the Saturday race of IndyCar. Christian Rasmussen sat P2 on the grid, less than a mile an hour slower than Abel, but he took the race win from Abel, getting past at the end of lap 2 very early in the race and led the rest of the way. He now sits P2 in the championship standings after gaining 50 points for his first place finish to Nolan Seagulls, considerably less, 15, finishing 15th in that race. Although a retirement due to suspension damage after a spin of an incident with Hunter McElroy. Jacob Abel finished in P2 and Rasmus Lund picked up his first podium of the season in P3. Jamie Chadwick equalled her season best finish, which she got last time out of Mid-Ohio in P10, but is still last of all the full-timers in the standings. Young Josh Pearson, LMP2 winner of the Portimao round of the World Endurance Championship, who's pairing Indy Next with his sports car duties, finished P6 behind Hunter McElroy and Matthew Brabham of the famous Brabham family racing in P4. In other news, it's been announced that 10 of the 15 drivers competing in F1 Academy will be decked out with F1 team liveries next year and will be competing alongside F1 as a support series at some of the races, most likely just the European ones, but maybe they'll throw a flyaway one in, perhaps Austin or maybe Melbourne to join the F2 and F3, which will also be racing there. This is also a good move, I think. Hopefully it'll give the drivers a good connection to F1 teams, but I hope this is more than just tokenism and a PR stunt, and I do wonder how the 10 cars and drivers will be chosen. That'll remain to be seen, but I'll keep you up to date with that. With any more news in future episodes, hopefully. A few driver changes, as I've also mentioned, coming up. Francesco Simonazzi moving to F3 for Carlin, and Mason joining PHM Racing by Chevreuse. Good step up for Francesco Simonazzi. He'll most likely be eyeing a full-time drive in F3 next year. And for Josh Mason, I do wonder if it is a bit too soon. He's done British F3 before, but that's only a national F3 championship. And he is skipping F3 entirely, moving up to the very international F2, very competitive championship, and I do think it's going to be very tricky conditions, so it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. I suppose if you have the opportunity for this and the funds behind you, why not go for the highest challenge you can get? I suppose with a junior career like Mason, it's not the best by any stretch of the imagination. F1 is almost certainly off the cards and is just looking to enjoy his single-seater racing at the second top tier while he can, so good for him, and will be very interesting to see how he gets on. Well, that concludes this episode of the Formula Next Gen podcast. Next week we go to Spa for the Belgian Grand Prix, F2 and F3 also in attendance. It's going to be pretty wet and miserable weather as usual. GP3, GP4 will be at Silverstone, as well as the penultimate round of the F1 Academy. So join us next week where we're going to be reviewing all those races and more. And see you next time on the Formula Next Gen podcast.